Welcome to Reels on the Rocks, the show where your hosts Whiskey and Sweet Tea discuss film from an unpretentious perspective. In this episode, we end Anime Month with a look at Paprika. We also touch on pretension in film and the rating system. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and as always, please be advised that spoilers are ahead.
Welcome back, everybody, to a couple of gaijin reviewing some anime.
To what? Welcome
so
back
gaijin, like, this is, I think it translates to foreigner, but it's basically, like, it's kind of used as, like, a term for people who are unfamiliar with Japanese culture, and I've heard people use it for people who don't watch anime, so...
Well, I'm very unfamiliar.
Sort of applies.
I'm unfamiliar with both, so I guess it does apply.
Sort of applies. I mean, again, like, I watch anime, but not as much as, again, it's like these days, I feel like everyone's watching it. But welcome back to a couple of gaijin watching some anime. This week, we are talking about Paprika, the very, very tasty spice, and also a feature film by Satoshi Kon.
Yes.
So, before we get into it, what are you drinking this week?
I am drinking oh my god, what is it called? I'm like sipping on it and I don't remember what it's called. There we go. I am having a smoky margarita.
Ooh.
So it's like, I made it with Casamigos tequila, some agave nectar, and I put some sea salt on the rim, and then it calls for like a tablespoon of smoked paprika.
Nice. And I recommended some cocktails to you before.
Right, you recommended
recording.
them, and then I was like, I can't do those because then he'll be like, you didn't look anything up, did you? I found something from the McCormick website.
Anyone who listened to our last review, Kiki, like I said, I was trying to get some sake, but I couldn't find any. And
is it sake
I did find
or
some.
sake?
So what I just found this at Ralph's. So, if anyone's interested in trying this, hopefully, I would think that it's maybe somewhat widely available. But let's see. It's Hakutsuru draft sake. I believe it's a Jun Mai. I'm just reading the bottle at this point. So, it's best served chilled. So it's been chilling in my fridge. I'm going to pop it open. It's like a white sake.
Will it make a popping sound?
I already just did it. And it's by the microphone. Maybe it picked it up. But and I'm drinking it out of that whiskey glass you always say I never use.
Yes, the ones I gave you
somewhat classy.
Yeah, the ones I gave you that you never use. But then again, I never visit you, so I can't really say that.
I use them. But yeah, so this, and also we'll see. This is 14% alcohol, so...
Oh my
might get
god!
Saucy this episode, but my drink is also served with a side of irony that we'll get into when I go into Satoshi Kon's background a little bit here because of what I drank last week. But anyway, so this week we're talking about Paprika. The reason there's a multitude of reasons I picked this. It's been on my list personally for like a decade. It kind of came up the more I was on internet forums and stuff for films and anime, it was brought up a lot, and mostly I heard people again a decade ago, around the time when Inception came out, a lot of anime fans were saying Chris Nolan ripped this movie off,
which I can.
And that kind of.
I mean, I've never seen Inception, but that's the vibe I got.
Kind of. So I'll get into that. I don't. The short answer is no, but I'll explain why later. But so I'd heard of it, and I knew what the concept was. But the other thing I picked it for was that neither of us had seen it, and I kind of, looking back, every time neither of us has seen a movie, I feel like the show ends up being a little more interesting because we're both going into it more or less blind.
Are you saying because we're going into Paprika blind, the show's gonna be spicier?
I would say so. Perhaps smoked even? No. But,
oh my god.
Anyway, so yeah, that long list of reasons I was into it. And on a personal note, I am familiar with the director somewhat. So before I get into his background, my first encounter with his work was actually on Adult Swim's Toonami program. He had a mini-series called Paranoia Agent that maybe some of you listening who are anime fans have heard of. It was sort of a horror series, sort of not. If I were to get into the details, this isn't a review of Paranoia Agent, but I really liked the episodes I saw. I was able to like binge through it later on when I was able to get it online. And then later on I found out he was sort of one of the big anime dudes. Like we talk about Miyazaki, and that's another reason I wanted to do this, is Satoshi Kon is considered one of the great anime directors, and we're trying not to just do Studio Ghibli films. Like last year I did Akira because that was my own personal favorite anime film. And this is a super noted film by a big famous director, more famous than I even realized, and we'll get into that too. But I liked his work, and it's very surreal. Paranoia Agent, sort of the same way. But anyway, so Satoshi Kon, he was born, he was born in October 12th, 1963, and unknown to me, I did not realize he'd passed away. So that was very sad to find out. He passed away.
Way to go, Whiskey. Way to go.
August 24th, 2010, and he passed away only at the age of 46 from pancreatic cancer.
Aww.
And he, he's a very celebrated anime director, artist, everything. He started out in manga, and he has a very short list of films. Perfect Blue is one I was thinking of doing a review for the show. Millennium Actress is a big one. And he's so influential that Time Magazine, actually, the year he passed away, made him Person of the Year. So
wow.
In 2010, Time Magazine made Satoshi Kon Person of the Year. Other thing about the film I had no idea until I read the end credits was that this is based on a novel by Yasutaka Tsutsui.
Well,
pronouncing that correct?
That novel must have been a trip then, just based on the visuals
in
this movie alone.
Pretty. I looked into the novel, and it's more or less like the film seems pretty faithful to the novel. So, yeah, and I'll get a little bit into the novel. Honestly, there's not too much to talk about. But anyway, so it came out on June 22nd, 2007 here in the States. But it was on the festival circuit all the way back in 2006. I didn't write down every date, but I believe, I know that the first screening of it was at the, I think, Venice Film Festival. Mm-hmm. I know it was in Italy, and it was in, the summer of that year, I think in, July. Budget, for some reason, IMDb has it listed with yen, so 300 million yen, which I know is around 3 million, at least in the conversion by today, so I don't know what it was back in 2006. What's crazy is this is another one of those bombs that is critically acclaimed, because it did not even make $1 million gross, worldwide. It's only at $946,390. So that's nuts, especially with how celebrated this film is. All sorts of publications said it was one of the best films of the year. So it's another one that no one went to see, but probably I'm guessing that has something to do with limited release. Also, if it were released today, I would imagine that it would do really well, because anime is just...
Well, if it was released today,
huge.
Everybody would just say it's a ripoff of Inception.
Well, I'll get into that. So, my whole thing with if I were to hear someone say he plagiarized it, so the idea is similar, but the story is completely different. It's not a heist movie. There is a little sci-fi element of how you can go into someone's dreams. For anyone who hasn't seen the film, I'd recommend that you see it, because if this is the first time you're hearing our show, we spoil the crap out of movies. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, check out the movie and then come back to the show. But that being said, so the whole thing about going into people's dreams, technically I would argue that's been around as long as cinema has been around. Inception ripped this. If Inception ripped it off from this, then this ripped it off from Nightmare on Elm Street, and Nightmare on Elm Street ripped it off from H.P. Lovecraft, and it keeps going back. You know what I mean? The idea of entering people's dreams is not a new idea.
Well, entering dreams or dream walking, because to me those are two different ideas.
Well, and even if we were to get really psychedelic on the show and go into shamanism and stuff, the idea of like someone, especially in this film where you have a therapist entering someone's dreams, like that's essentially what people who have like shamanistic beliefs believe the witch doctor is doing, you know, entering your dreams through the spirit world and healing you internally. So the idea that Chris Nolan ripped this off, the concept, no. If he, like, I'm sure, I'm not going to say he's the first one to think of it, because, again, the idea has been around forever, even since before, you know, movies existed. As far as visuals, I didn't see anything from Inception that was taken from this movie directly. There was no city folding in on itself or anything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone listening, but
what about...
I didn't see any direct, like, visual inspiration. And then, as I said, the story was completely different. That's where, for me, it becomes almost blatant plagiarism. If the story is exactly the same, then for me, I'll be like, yeah, they ripped it off. And there's even better, like Star Wars, something I really like. You know, people, if you've seen Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, it's very similar to A New Hope.
Oh, yeah, I think I remember hearing about that. Actually, I think George Lucas even said he was inspired by it.
Exactly, and I wouldn't say that that's plagiarism either, because he has his own unique world he was building and stuff. So, like, that's where it gets kind of, there's a fine line. So do I think that this is a ripoff of it, or Inception is a ripoff of this movie? Not really. Not really at all. Like, and also, like, I was such a fan of Inception at the time that I bought the screenplay at a bookstore, and it had a foreword by Chris Nolan. He came up with the idea in college. Like, he used to go, there was apparently, like, they would serve breakfast at his university at a really early time. And so he liked getting the free food, and he'd wake up just to go to breakfast, but he'd still be half asleep. And he was kind of really into, like, he came up with the idea because of how half asleep he was at the time. And I think he was, like, getting really into, like, lucid dreaming at the time and stuff like that. So he was like, ooh, what if I did, like, a heist movie? So he came up with it, like, years before.
Right.
Maybe who knows, maybe he read the book, because the book, and I'll get into that now, might as well, the book came out all the way in 1991. The book had been around for like 15 years or so. It was first published in Marie Claire magazine in 4 parts from 1991 to 1993.
It was in Marie Claire magazine?
Yep.
Oh my god, I love that.
Which is interesting, because I wonder if it was it's like a Japanese novel. So that's what's interesting to me, is I wonder if it was published in Japanese, because the other thing is the English version of the full novel was only published in 2009. So the book, if you wanted to read the novel this was based on, it would have come out like 2 years after this film came out. So, yeah, and it was translated by Andrew Driver. Besides this movie, there have been other adaptations. There was actually 2 manga adaptations. There was a direct manga adaptation based on the book directly. And then this film, again, didn't seem to do well at the box office, but for whatever reason, they did a manga adaptation of the film as well. So 2 separate manga adaptations on top of the film. And the other, as I said, I looked up like the plot synopsis and stuff of the novel, and the only difference I could find was like the detective, and that too. In the film, it's sort of like suggested that the character we start off with isn't even a detective, and that was like just something he thought of in his dreams or something. But in the book, it's like specified that he's like a car company executive, so. not a cop, not a detective or anything like that. And also, fun fact, the author of the novel voices one of the 2 bartenders in the dream world.
Oh, that's cool.
So fun little cameo from him.
I mean, those bartenders that reminded me of The Shining.
So
again, a lucid dreaming sort of thing.
So I've just been listing off a bunch of factoids. So I'll get more into Satoshi Kon in my notes on him, but I am curious what your thoughts on the film are.
So it was really cool, but I was like, I have no idea what I just watched. I was so lost. I mean, I got kind of sort of the very basic grasp of what was going on, but I could not understand what was happening half the time.
I think what was cool is that the dreams really, like the real world flowed into the dreams so effortlessly that it was very hard to notice when it was happening, and sometimes you'd be kind of caught off guard. And it was very disorienting, but I think that was intentional, especially since the story is that the guy is using the technology to like make people like hurt themselves by thinking like the dreams are like going into people's waking consciousness and making them essentially hallucinate. So I think the fact that it got kind of confusing that way was sort of good, because it's sort of, you know.
Well,
like,
actually, I
feel like people would be like, how will you not know you're in a dream? And that's kind of like.
Well, there were parts of it where, like, the ending actually made the most sense when it was into reality. That made sense, and I kind of understood when some people would do that before. I was so confused for the first time because they kept referring to who was the guy they went into the dreams to look for the first time. It was like Hugh Murray or something, right? Like. What was his name?
Yeah, let me see if I got this.
I was like,
I wrote some of the names down, so let me see if I got that. But the detective guy is who you're talking about, right?
No, not the detective guy, because so he starts in there. There was, oh my god, what? I'm trying to remember what that guy's name is. Oh, I think his name was Himuro.
Yeah.
I was like, because we don't never meet him at the beginning, so they're talking about this guy like I should know who he is, and I had no idea who he was. And then I was like, wait, did I just not hear somebody's name at the beginning? Like, what was going on? And then it was also kind of confusing to me because it seemed like it was like 3 separate stories at one point. But it's portraying them as though they're all related, but they don't become related till it was very odd to me. The way
the point at which I got confused was when they revealed the villain, because it kind of happened randomly. Like there wasn't any build up to it. It just sort of, hey, it was me the whole time, and it turns out it was the head of
the chairman,
the CEO, essentially.
Yeah, the chairman.
And I was very confused. I was like, wait, is it someone puppeting the CEO, or is it him? And then there was also that one side character that showed up in a few scenes that turned out to have like a crush on Paprika, and at first I was thinking like, wait, is this? I thought for a second it was the overweight scientist, like who, and that was like his dream body or something. Like, ooh, maybe she'll like me when I'm skinny. And then I was like, wait, no, that's where it got confusing to me. But like,
I think the guy you talked about, his name is Osane or Osanai, one of those.
Yeah.
He was like the right hand man.
Yes, exactly, and that was he was such a small character that I forgot that he existed, and so again, like when they got revealed, I was kind of confused because I was like, wait, what's going on? But what I gather from the plot, so you've got, you know, this technology was invented by this very portly scientist who's very likable. And also very kind of like childlike in how he comes up with a wild idea and then he comes up with the technology around it. So he's like, what if you could share dreams with your friends? So he comes up with that technology, and this company is like, you could use this for therapy. Like, you know, go in and deal with people's, you know, trauma and stuff through their dreams. But some unnamed, until the end of the film, character has, and we think that it's like his assistant at first, and then that's proven wrong, but someone has hijacked a prototype of this technology and is essentially using it as a weapon, targeting people and making them dream while awake so that they do things like walk off of buildings. And so it's all about them trying to figure out who stole the technology, why, and get it back before any harm is done.
See, I didn't understand that motivation, though, because he kept talking about how he wanted to be the gatekeeper of dreams and keep technology out of dreams, but then he's, like, doing the opposite to me. I was so confused what his motivations were.
I was confused, but my interpretation, I will probably watch this film again, but what I got from it was that, because throughout the whole movie he keeps saying we're going to scrub this program. This program's dangerous. We shouldn't be doing this. And that's kind of what he's parroting at the end, like dreams are too sacred to mess with. So my interpretation was that he did it so that he could show what damage people could do. And like he wasn't ever going to be found out to be the person doing it. It was just like his way. The way I took it, he wanted the program shut down, and he needed like an excuse to get it shut down. So he stole the technology and started, you know, trying to kill people so that it'd be like, oh, this is too dangerous. We need to scrub the program. That's what I got from it.
And then
he was saying a lot of psychobabble crap at the end of the movie that was kind of as coherent as the weird stuff people were saying as they were dreaming. So
yeah.
I don't know what he was saying about, and that too. I don't know if you watched last episode. For anyone who hates people who watch dubs, ooh, they're the worst. I watched the subbed version. I don't know if you did as well, but that's another thing where it's like maybe it was a translation error or something.
That's the only thing I could find, because I couldn't find the English dub anywhere. And I know people are like, "Ooh, the subtitled version is the better version." And I'm not sure why they say that, because to me, if there's a dub that's an official dub that's released, I always think, because then I can watch the movie in a very similar way to how they want it to be seen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't
let subtitles stop me, but if there's an option, yeah, I'd rather go for that one.
I'm either or, honestly. The thing with me is, how is the dub? Like, part of the reason I will always give a pass to Miyazaki movies is because they are so well known and there's such a prestige to them that they always get the top of the line voice actors to do it, and they always take it very seriously. I do think that it is worth criticizing, because sometimes you get really bad, like infamously. I don't know if you watched Squid Game back when that was like super crazy popular, but it infamously had a bad dub, which is extra funny because it was an official Netflix dub, and it is funny. I'm sure, like, you can Google. I'm sure, probably our listeners know what I'm talking about. There was tons of like compilations and stuff of like just how bad it was on YouTube and whatnot, and it's bad. So, and I just watched Squid Game with the dub because that was, or not the dub, the subs, because that's, might as well. That's how it was, originally on there. But I don't really care either way. I do see the people who are like dubs or nothing, or subs or nothing. I do understand where they're coming from, because sometimes you get very subpar performances, depending on who made the film and how much the voice actors care about the material. Sometimes you just get people who are phoning it in, or you get bad translations and it makes less sense. Or, so I do get it, but I will say one of the things that I prefer more about dubs is because there is certain emotional expressions that are different in different cultures, and so the way they're expressing something in their tone of voice and the way they do things and the way they say things is different for them, and it won't, because I'm not part of that culture, I will not pick up on that expression or that way. Then that's more confusing, because you use the subtitles to know what they're saying, but you also try to use the tone of the voice, the fluctuation, to kind of sort of understand how they feel about something. And so to me, that's kind of where subs only creates a problem, because you don't get that. Yeah, I feel that. I will say, the voice acting, at least I don't speak Japanese, but it seemed pretty great.
I
actually really liked the voice
actress. Japanese. I
really liked the voice actress for Paprika. I looked into it. I didn't write her name down, but she's a really big anime voice actress. She's also a character on Evangelion.
She had a very sweet voice.
She killed it. She was honestly, like, again, I don't speak Japanese, so I can't really speak for the performance super well. But she, for me, was standout. I really liked, and I also liked how she had a very different tone of voice when she was Paprika or when she was Chibi. Mm-hmm. Because they were essentially two different characters. But she was a big standout for me. Everyone else was fine. I just she really stood out.
Oh, I love that her real life person. I thought this confused me, because it's like she had like 3 names in real life. In real life, she had Chidi, she had Atashka, and then she had Cat Ad or something.
I don't think she had 3 names. I think so. She was Paprika. Ad or whatever the guy called her, she hated that, and I guess that was a term of endearment. I think Atashi and Chibi are like her full name. Like some people, like when people call you by your surname only.
Right.
Like, I think that's what that was. So I think Adat or whatever he called her was like almost I don't know what it means, but I guess it's like calling her like sweetie or something. And then Chibi Atashi is like her full name. or Atashi Chibi, whichever way, and
Well,
then obviously Paprika.
I interpreted her nickname as a portmanteau of her first, because I think her name was like Atashka was her last name, I believe, and then what'd you say her first name was? Chibi. I think it was a portmanteau because it was like cat or something. So I think it was supposed to be a portmanteau, her first and last name.
That was something, because again, I knew the gist of this film. I didn't know, like, I'd never seen it before, but that was something I wasn't expecting, is for this film to essentially have a Manic Pixie Dream Girl in it. A literal Manic Pixie Dream Girl. But the way it opens and everything, the opening title sequence was great too, like her skipping around and doing all that trippy stuff, stopping traffic. And
that soundtrack for that part was great. I love the soundtrack.
It's great. That's such a good song that I watched the whole end credits just because I liked listening to that song. But yeah, she was, and that, again, obviously I would hope that if you're listening to this podcast, you've seen the movie, but if for whatever reason you rather like hearing us talk about it. So one of the main characters is a therapist scientist who has an alternate version of herself that she uses for dream therapy. And this is our titular character, Paprika. And she's almost like a superhero.
See, honestly, I never picked up on that. So she was a therapist.
Yes.
Okay. Because I was like,
also,
why is she the go-to person? I'm like, because she's just sitting around having conversations with people. And they're like, oh, go to her. And I'm like, well, why though? Okay, now I know she's a therapist. That makes sense now.
Yeah, she's like a therapist, and I guess she is somewhat, obviously that one scientist guy is the one who developed the technology, but she seems somewhat familiar with it. That's another thing, actually, and I'm curious to hear your feedback. So at the end of the film, and I got confirmation of this when I was researching the novel a little bit, but I thought that was neat. I think it was obvious that the scientist who developed the technology had a crush on her, but I didn't realize that it was reciprocated until the end. And I think that was kind of supposed to be a reveal. And when it happened, I was like, wait, does she like him too? And I got confirmation, yeah, like in the book, like, yeah, they're like romantically interested in each other. And I was not expecting that at all. They kind of made him like, he was likable, but he was also kind of buffoonish sometimes.
Right. And I kind of got the impression from the fact that, he was so pudgy, and he was, and he would just shovel the food in, and moving around at all caused him to sweat. I thought that was funny though. I love, there's a scene early in the film where he just orders like 3 full meals at once, and I love that. It's like, who got the steak? Oh, that's me. Who got the seafood soup? That was also me too. Well, it was also, I liked that because I think the expectation was that we were supposed to find him somewhat creepy. I
never really did. He reminded me of Winnie the Pooh, honestly. He was, but like a smart Winnie the Pooh, because he is very like, kind of, again, buffoonish, but he's not stupid. And that was something, again, when they introduced him and he's stuck in the elevator, I was shocked when I found out, oh, this is the guy who invented the...
I thought that was like a side effect of something. I was like, oh my god, this weird person's experiencing a side effect, and he just started inflating in the elevator. That's what I thought at first.
But yeah, when they revealed that he was the one who created this technology, I was like, wait, really? Mm-hmm. And the more you got to know him, like, again, he's not the only one. Like, scientists often in media are kind of portrayed not buffoonish, but maybe like not very socially, they're very smart, but socially they're not very good. And I kind of got the same vibe from him. And they also describe him as like childish. Like if he has like some fanciful idea, he's just smart enough to be able to invent the technology to
make it happen.
That fanciful, yeah, and that was the thing about him. Like, as they were trying to solve this mystery, it was really cool to see that he wasn't useless. He was often, like, oh, well, we could do this, or we could do... and he was goofy. Like, that's the best way I could. He was likable goofball who also happens to be a genius.
Well, right, but what I mean by creepy, maybe creepy wasn't the word, but basically he was supposed to be likable, but we were supposed to kind of put the two of them in separate boxes. Like, these two don't go together.
I never would have expected that there was any sort of like reciprocated feelings between them, and that was actually kind of refreshing.
Right.
I would argue that it comes out of nowhere, but also like it recontextualizes the first 2 acts, because it seems like he's just being like, like, it seems like he has a crush on her, and she's aware of it.
Right.
But by the time, like, the film ends, if you were to rewatch it, you'd see, like, oh, she's kind of, in a weird way, almost... When you know that she likes him back, it almost seems like more like flirting between the two of them.
Yeah.
Like, oh, AT-AT, don't call me that,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's, again, you wouldn't think so watching the movie, and I even think that was supposed to be kind of like a reveal. Like, oh my god, she loves him too. Like, I don't think you're supposed to think that there's a thing between them.
And that's exactly what I mean by portraying him in this way and her in one way. They wanted you to put them in separate boxes in your mind so that at the end it is a reveal. But I would argue that it wasn't entirely out of nowhere, because towards the end they have that scene where Dream Her pulls Robot him out of the thing, and then we get to see the conversation, I guess, that happened or whatever. And so that kind of opened the door more. Like, you still don't totally realize what the context that is, but then at the end it makes sense. So it does not, to me, it didn't feel like it came out of nowhere. For that scene alone.
No, again, for me, I think also, like, again, this is a movie I feel like will reward repeat viewings. I even was thinking of maybe picking this up on Blu-ray, because I did like it quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And it's also not very long.
I thought it was great.
So, so, like, I might actually end up owning this one because I liked it so much. But I do think that rewatching it is kind of a good idea, because I think that there is such a stimulus overload in this film that I would be surprised if anyone was able to get everything on the first viewing. Mm-hmm. I think knowing what happens later on can be kind of helpful in, like, noticing things you didn't notice before. Because there's other things too, like there's the whole side plot. As I said, there's the detective, and he's going through some kind of trauma, and he's getting therapy from Chibi, but he doesn't know that it's Chibi. He thinks, like, oh, it's Paprika, and, that's a whole thing. Or if you find out that it was because he felt like he abandoned his friend, so that's like a whole side story. And also even just understanding the villain's motivation. I could be completely wrong. Someone who's a fan of this film might be screaming at their phone or whatever they're listening to this podcast on. Like, you idiot! You stupid idiot, Whiskey! How could you not even know that? Of course, the CEO is trying. I don't know, but yeah, like, I think this is one of those films that definitely rewards repeat viewings. I think I would get a lot more out of it with that, and I'm not surprised I didn't pick up on the romantic stuff, because I think I was just desperately trying to, like, keep up with understanding what was happening.
Right. And I think now that we sort of have a base idea of what's happening, the signs will become clearer.
Yes.
I will say,
and I think
something that did confuse... Oh, why don't you finish your thought first?
No. You go ahead.
So I was going to say, one thing that confused me was the detective guy towards the end. What is his name? I know, and we're being such horrible people because it's not our culture. I almost wrote down
the names,
we don't,
but I didn't think we were going to need to, like, specify all these people. But anyway,
no, not Taquito, not him. Oh yeah, Kanakawa, Detective Kanakawa. Yeah, that guy. So when there's one scene where they're watching, him and Paprika are watching a movie together. And this is when the dreams are merging, they're fading into each other, whatever, that scene. And so she takes off and she turns back or whatever, and we see Takanawa, like, it looks like he's, like, making out with a mannequin or something. It's weird. And so I thought he had been taken by the dream and that he was out of commission, because we don't see him for, like, a few scenes, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, bring him back, he can help us. And I'm like, but isn't he, like, nuts now? So I wish that had been made more clear.
Well, and again, that's another thing that's unclear to me, because as I said, in the novel, he's like a car company executive or something like that. Right. And that was something I picked up on when I saw this. They sort of almost suggested that he wasn't really a cop, and I was like, wait. Which, again, would make sense, because if you're in a dream, it's like, oh, okay, you want to be a cop or someone cool or something, But
right.
That's another thing where I'm like, wait a second, was he a cop? And that also kind of, how would he know this guy from university who, first of all, looks like 20 years older than him, and secondly is, like, in a science company, like
Right.
he's a scientist. So that was weird to me. Like, how wouldn't you have been at like police academy or something? What do you mean you met at university? So I don't know. There's some, and who knows? Maybe the book is better at fleshing all this stuff out. But the movie is a little confusing. I will say that
It is confusing, but like you said, I feel like it was a movie that was definitely designed for multiple viewings, and I feel like it'll be one of those things where, with retrospection, stuff will become clearer.
And it's sort of, again, Paranoia Agent has this too, where he really likes to, and you know what, I'll use this to segue into talking about Satoshi Kon, because a lot of his work.
Wait. I have a couple more questions about the movie.
Yes.
Okay, so that weird doll thing, is that like a cultural symbol or something? Because that looked very, very similar to the weird doll thing in Squid Game. So I don't know if that is an Asian-influenced look or not.
I think it's just a look of a doll. Honestly, like, I didn't do a lot of research into cultural stuff because that would have taken me hours. It's the sort of thing. But for instance, that parade that kind of kept happening in the dream, I guarantee that there's some sort of significance with that I'm not aware of.
Okay.
And again, anyone who listens to our show, feel free to tweet at us if you want to explain this or something. But
did you get the Easter egg though at the end of the movie?
Ooh, what was the Easter egg?
And I only got this because I Googled the movie to figure out where to watch it, and it suggested other things. So when he goes to the movie theater to go see, I guess, Dream Kids or whatever it's called.
Oh, I wonder. I might know this. Continue, though.
Okay, you probably do. He looks across movies that are playing, and one of them is Tokyo Godfather, which is another one of his movies.
It's another one of Satoshi Kon's movies.
Yeah.
I did not notice that, but there you go. Like, I know the movie from looking up Satoshi Kon. The Easter egg I was thinking of is when he's talking about his trauma with Paprika in the movie theater, and he's talking about how he used to love movies. He looks different. He's wearing different clothes. He's wearing like sunglasses and a hat. He's sitting a certain way. That's actually he looks like Akira Kurosawa.
Oh.
So, like, when he's talking about how, I used to make movies, like, they intentionally drew him to look like Akira Kurosawa. Because, again, he's in a dream, and,
right.
I'm a filmmaker, and so, like, it's almost like if I was having a dream and I suddenly looked like Spielberg or something.
Well, so I'd hope you'd want to look better than that.
Gotcha. And any... no, I'd want to... who would I want to look... I don't, honestly, like, we talked about Chris Nolan. Chris Nolan,
there you go.
I feel like we talked about this in Memento years ago, but he looks like Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah, why don't you want to look like Chris Nolan? Like a film genius and is kind of hot.
Right? But anyway, was there any other questions you wanted to ask?
The other thing is I had trouble sort of understanding the subplot of Takanawa. So what is this thing about him killing himself in the hallway? And then at first they made it seem like that was an actual case he was working on, because he said, that's the homicide case I'm on. But then it's actually, I was lost as to what that is. And I wonder if you had any theories on that.
I do. I thought that was actually kind of it's funny. I found that story more interesting than the like killings going on. So what I think it's metaphorical. What I think he means is like that aspect of his life died when he abandoned his friend. He was an aspiring filmmaker, and he had this friend who he was really close with, and he abandoned his friend to finish a film that they never finished, and he killed his filmmaker self. That's how I interpreted it anyway. Like that his creative side died when he abandoned his friend to, I don't know, join the police academy or whatever he was doing.
And I forget, did they explain why he abandoned his friend?
I think they did, and it's funny. It hasn't even been that long since I watched the film for this review, but I'm guessing it was for his police job. That's what I think it was. He got busy. Something happened. Something in his life happened. I don't know. I'm guessing it had to do with his career, but I don't remember. I do think they specify it. I just, for some reason, I can't remember what he said it was. And maybe they didn't specify it, and maybe that's why I can't remember. but I feel like they did, and I feel like it was his career, but I might be wrong. Or maybe it was just, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it was just university was over, and they went their separate ways.
he was like, and peace, deuces.
Which is, And also, his friend, that was something that was not metaphorical. His friend passed away. So I feel like his trauma is that his guilt. Like, I think that his death, quote unquote, was metaphorical. And I think that he felt guilty that their film died with his friend. And along with all of that, so did his passion for filmmaking. And that's what he means. Like, he didn't literally kill himself. He was just like, that whole side of his personality has been dead.
God, okay, no, that makes sense. Well, now that we have that out of the way, let's learn more about Mr. Satoshi Kon.
Yes, so he, it's funny, I even watched some video interviews with him, and he is not charismatic, and I don't say that in a mean way. Like, it's funny, like, he's kind of perfect for this show, because our whole thing that we rally behind here is anti-pretension. We don't like filmmakers that have massive egos, and Satoshi Kon is very soft-spoken. Like in the interview I was watching, I couldn't find any for this film, but he was talking about Deep Blue, his directorial debut, and he's, also a very surreal kind of movie, and he's talking about, like, we're not really going out to, like, confuse people, but we just want, a kind of more interesting story that people are able to interpret for themselves. And let me see. Yeah, so he says he wants the audience to draw their own conclusions with their own imaginations. So, which is something I'm very into. We've talked about, like, other surrealist filmmakers like David Lynch on the show and stuff, and that's one thing I really like about him, is that he refuses to explain his movies, because, and the metaphor I think he's used, but I like to use, is it's like you go to a museum and you look at a painting. You don't have someone explaining to you exactly what the painting means. There might be a little plaque explaining stuff, but it ruins the fun. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like
clearly never been to the National Gallery of Art.
But that's what I mean. Like,
no, I get you.
And not even just paintings, just art in general. Like, you don't get that. But with movies, it's like, and you see this online with people, like, this film explained, and it's like, I hate that. It robs you of any sort of, like, engagement with the work. It's fine if you like watching those things. I'm not gonna, like, hate on people who this confused me, I want to see what this interpretation is. I don't think that's wrong, but I do hate it when people have, like, a set meaning for something. I think that there's value in different perspectives having different readings on different films.
Right.
And that's one thing that I like that Satoshi Kon, that's something he values in his work, is like, I want the audience to draw their own conclusion with their own imagination.
That's actually kind of interesting, because I'm very much, it's weird. I kind of ride the fence on this, because I like in a sense, I would love to ask and be like, I don't really want to do, like, what did this mean? I kind of want to be like, what is this with him? Especially with this movie, because you're talking about there's so much that is, but he doesn't seem like Dave. I don't think he would refuse to explain it to you. He didn't. Well, again, he seems honestly like a very laid back guy. Like, I don't think it's like, oh, I'm not going to explain it to you, or like, I honestly think if he were here on the show right now and you had questions for him, I think he'd happily explain something to you that you didn't understand. Yeah, because I think what I'm trying to get at here is, especially with me, there's stuff that I will not understand on face value, and I do need someone to sit there and explain to me what the face value thing of it is. So then from there, I can interpret it my own way. I mean, like, the best example I can think of, not to go off the rails here, is the song "Cruel Summer" by Taylor Swift. I'm just telling you, because I was like, it's cool, it's catchy, but I have no idea what this is about, and I Googled it, and I was like, okay, so it's about this. But then after that, the more I listened to it, I'm like, you know what? That's kind of what it, but this is what it means to me. It was like I had to have some sort of base understanding of what it was, so I could build my own meaning, what I think it means.
That is perfectly what I'm talking about with films, and why I mentioned David Lynch, and I like that sort of, like, stance on not just avant-garde cinema, but just cinema. Like, yes, there is like a intended meaning from the author or whatever, but everyone has a personal connection with a movie. You know, every movie is someone's favorite movie, and there's always a personal reason for that. And I that is exactly what I mean when I say I love that. You know, David Lynch doesn't explain things, because it robs you of, like, you know, if there's some know-it-all film hipster just being like, this is what it means, this is a metaphor for this. It's like, shut up. Are you happy you're so smart? Like, it's just, and it takes a lot of the fun. Like, especially now, like, I'm not a doomer. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, film is dying. Like, oh, kids don't appreciate movies.
I don't think it's evolving.
Well, I think that mentality will kill because a lot of the fun of films, for me, is your own personal interpretation. And I think that's why I like a lot of avant-garde cinema. Between the two of us, I'm the one who likes weird stuff. And I think that's part of the reason I get a lot of fun out of it, is decoding it is kind of a lot of the fun for me. And again, if you have some dickhead just like trying to tell you what it means, it's like, one, that person isn't very fun to be around, and two, it's like, it's more fun for everyone to have their own reading of it and discuss it rather than...
You know what? Since you just love freaky film, you need to watch Two Guys, One Hammer.
I'm not into snuff films. No, so the other thing, I keep describing this as surrealist and stuff, and I also was talking.
Hold on. I want to like kind of like bookend like what you just said.
Yeah.
So, you know, and you're absolutely right. Like, I feel like when people say, I'm kind of with you on this, when people say film is dying, it's like, I don't think film is dying. I think maybe the way that they viewed film, or they understood it, or they made it, that's, you know...
That's valid.
Now,
it's a valid, you know...
It's valid. But it's coming... But those filmmakers, your era, there's a whole new way of thinking, way of interpreting, way of showing, way of enjoying, way of liking. And to me, to be somebody who is a connoisseur of film, or a protector of film, or wants to protect the cinema... You need to let that happen, because it's everything. Like, you just look at history. Like, we don't dress in bell bottoms anymore. And I'm sure somebody who died in the 60s would be like, oh my God, fashion is dead. What the hell are these people wearing nowadays? And you can't do that, because like you said, it essentially it's a self-defeating way of looking at things.
For sure. And I mean, we talked about this years ago in our first year of doing the show. We were talking about AFI and the Oscars and all this sort of stuff, and like, my stance hasn't changed since then about how, you know, AFI's list of movies, it's got to change over the years. Yeah, just because something was the best movie doesn't mean that it's always going to be the best movie. If we want things to improve, then things are going to get better. You know, like, Citizen Kane was dethroned as the greatest film of all time, and someone is going to dethrone Vertigo at some point. You know,
right.
That's just the way art is. Like, and also, it's meaningless. This is just one establishment's take on like what the greatest film is. Doesn't mean anything. Like, I know sometimes you get kind of heated about like Criterion and that sort of thing, but all they are, and I get this, it's not just you, it's like, you know, hipsters will like say, oh, it's a Criterion film, so that means it's a great film. All it is a film preservation like society. Like, they are picking the films that they deem worthy of preserving. That's all it is. It's not exactly like if I would the best movie. Right. It's just, we have chosen these films that we want to make sure don't get, you know, lost to time. That's all it is. And I could create our own film preservation and come up with our own list of movies we want to preserve.
Obviously, Paddington 2 would have to be preserved based on...
hey, if more of you guys keep listening to the show, let's do it. Let's come up with... We'll call it something goofy. We'll have you guys vote on it, and we'll we'll preserve whatever movies we feel like.
Oh my God! But we can call them our selections. You know, like a wine selection or something.
Oh man!
And then and then we'll have the aged whiskey section with yours ones, and we'll have my, I don't know, I guess, box of tea.
We'll be the only collection where you can get all 3 of the Evil Dead movies at once instead of having to get them separately because Universal is annoying.
Well, and for those of you who are who've just kind of joined us, that's one of the reasons why my catchphrase at the end is "suck it, Scorsese," is because it's very frustrating for me to hear somebody that so many people look up to as like this, a savior of film or connoisseur of film or just think, and hear him talk down about the next generation of filming simply because he doesn't get it. That's kind of where it comes from.
And I'm not quite as harsh with him. Quite frankly, as far as big directors who are jerks, I think that he's been severely dethroned by oh wow, why am I forgetting? Oh my goodness.
Ridley Scott.
Ridley Scott, thank you. Because for one thing, he, like, Scorsese, I always remind you this, but he did apologize, and he did, like, try and clarify what he was talking about. But anyway, let's get back into the movie.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was talking about how this is, like, very surreal, and it kind of, like, flows in and out of reality. And that's like a thing with all of his movies. Perfect Blue, in case we review it in the future, I won't reveal too much, but that's sort of about a Japanese pop star's sort of mental breakdown while she's going solo, while also having to deal with a stalker. And so there's some surrealist elements with her sort of hallucinating things. Paranoia Agent, the show that introduced me to Satoshi Kon, is about a string of violent beatings being perpetrated by a ghostly kid on roller skates. And
why does that low-key sounds fascinating?
It's a really good show, and it has a very cool ending where I won't spoil it. But anyway, like, so this is like a thing. I haven't seen Millennium Actress or Tokyo Godfathers, but one thing that's in all of his work is he's very into, as he said in the interview I watched, he is interested in blending or blurring the lines between fiction and reality. And I think that is part of what makes this film so confusing and also very engaging. So like I said, when it translates to the dream world, it is seamless, to the point where you kind of lose track of where it happens. And it's interesting. Like, it's certainly a stylistic thing with him. And the other thing that is so hard, like, I don't even know how we're going to touch on this, because it's like describing different animation styles is like describing food. There's only so many adjectives you can come up with that like explain it. But the other thing that I've seen, again, with Paranoia Agent and this, he has a very unique like style with how he draws characters. The action is very fluid. And that was something he was saying in his Perfect Blue interview, is like he was very interested in the flow, making the story and the animation flow as well as possible. And I think that applies to this film as well. But it's hard to really even explain how it is. Again, it's like you have a really solid freaking piece of cake in front of you. You can call it moist, you can call it sweet, you can call it decadent, you can call it rich. But eventually, you're going to be repeating yourself, and I wish there was a better way of me explaining the animation. But all I can really say is I hope I like this film, and if you guys are anime fans, I think you'll like this film. And if you're just a fan of animation in general, I think you'll like this film, because it again, Miyazaki gets a lot of the attention with like non-anime fans. And one thing, if we continue to do this every year on the show, I sort of want to try and branch out and make sure we're covering all of our bases as far as different anime directors.
Right.
Because it's not just about Miyazaki. And he also has a very specific, like, character design. Like, Kiki actually kind of looks like Satsuki from My Neighbor Totoro a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, like, he's very into, like, landscapes and natural locations and stuff. And he also
What's interesting to me is like what you said, you were talking about ways to describe, anime. And as you said before, we're not anime connoisseurs. So to us right now, they kind of all sort of look the same. But the more we expose ourselves to anime and different directors, drawers, artists, stylists, we will start to notice the things that make it different. Because like as an outsider, everything will look the same to you. Like somebody who's like never seen like art before, like all the impressionist paintings all look the same to them. And then
it's just hard to describe. I think part of it is also like neither of us have a background in animation. Like we both have like studied moving images, but when neither of us can really draw, it's hard to really get into, like on past episodes of the show, I've gone into cinematography because I know what I'm talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to animation. I can only just sort of explain. And it's like, and it's not just with anime. Like before we recorded this, I was going into like what I was going to say about certain things. One thing I was thinking about is like how I was going to introduce like this film as opposed to like last week or last episode we covered a Miyazaki film, and it's like how Miyazaki is the quote unquote Walt Disney of anime. Walt Disney is not the sole animator of American animation, and at the same time Disney was coming up, you've got people like Max Fleischer making more adult stuff like Betty Boop, that's integrating jazz and sexuality and all these other things. And I was going to make a comparison there with how Satoshi Kon is also just as revered as Miyazaki, but for different reasons. And also his films are a lot less, I'd say for the most part, Miyazaki films are pretty family friendly. All of Satoshi Kon's work is R-rated, heavy subject matter. Again, Perfect Blue, his film debut, it deals with stalking, potential sexual assault and other things like that. And this film, I don't think gets super intense, but you do have some pretty violent images and some nudity and stuff in this film.
That's what I was going to ask you, and I was going to be like, so why was this rated R? And the only thing I can think of is the end scene where we have very large
you see full
nude
boobies.
Atsuko.
You see Chibi's boobs. I think you even see Paprika's boobs when she is still in like her Paprika form or whatever. But I literally was wondering the same thing watching the film, because I was thinking, this is like PG-13 for like 90% of the film, and then at the end it's like, oh, it's the nudity.
Well, you know what I liked about this is, I've talked to you before. I think we talked about this when we did Moonrise Kingdom. And I told you when I was watching Moonrise Kingdom, I'm like, I kept waiting for the seedy undercurrent to show up and kind of ruin everything.
Was Moonrise Kingdom rated R?
No, it wasn't. It was rated PG-13. But I kept telling you because it was so idealistic and happy. I'm like, okay, where's the seedy undercurrent that everybody's sleeping together or they're all on drugs? And it never showed up. And I was worried that was going to happen for a minute with, I think his name is Shima, the little short doctor, the old one. And I was like, because at one point when he's being taken over by the dream thing, this like young girl, she's talking to him, and she almost makes it seem like she's gonna like pleasure him sexually or something. I'm like, oh great, are we gonna find out that he's a pedophile or something? And then it just turns out I was so happy he just stayed kind of this quirky fun guy. I was very happy about that.
Well, that's funny. Like Moonrise Kingdom, I know why it's PG-13, because there was some stuff in there that probably wasn't exactly family friendly, but PG-13 is like, it's the new PG ever since that happened in the 80s because of those violent films. PG-13 is not particularly seedy, and maybe we should even cover this in the future. Have you seen the film This Film Is Not Yet Rated?
You mean the documentary?
Yes.
No, I have not seen it.
It is fascinating. Because I think anyone would agree that a rating system is needed. It's part of the reason the video game industry is able to operate without people blaming them for violence all the time.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was no ratings, and movies just had to be appropriate for all audiences. And then with the innovation of a rating system, you were able to have like adult films and kid films. I don't think anyone has a problem with that, but when you look into how the MPAA works, it is the most completely insane, because it's literally just like 12 people who just decide based on how they feel in that moment what a film should be. Because honestly, I don't think this film should have been rated R. I think it should have been PG-13. Because frankly, I don't think nudity is all that traumatizing. I do know with like...
First time nudities, with nudity specifically, it has to be it's a little bit more technical with nudity. It has to do with the context. Nudity has to do with the length of time it's on screen. It has to do with how detailed it is.
I am telling you,
for example,
that is not true. You should, maybe we'll review it in a future episode, but you should see that documentary, because no, there is no rules. It is just they vote on it. And that's what it is. Like, they'll justify it later by being like, oh, well, this was 12 seconds of nudity as opposed to 10, so it's R-rated. Well, yeah, it's literally just how they feel in the moment, and it's incredibly funny. We talked a little bit about, like, the rating system in Friday the 13th, that episode, because one thing about that whole series is they were constantly having to change edits for all of the different Friday the 13th movies, because it's like 1 second, oh, this is an X-rated movie, oh, now it's PG-13, now it's like, they just, it's silly, the sort of thing, like, oh, well, the blood is on the screen for half a second longer, so we're gonna make it X-rated. And it's sort of the same thing with this. I know the first time I believe I saw any nudity was in Titanic, which is PG-13, and you see Rose's boobs.
You do.
For a pretty good long time.
You do, but it's like I said, at least this is my justification for it. It's still rated R. Oh no, you're right. No, Titanic is PG-13. I apologize.
It is PG-13. It is not rated R.
And I think
I saw that film when I was in kindergarten, because again, it was like a freaking national, like, everyone was seeing Titanic. So even though it was PG-13, my parents are like, oh, it's a love story, it'll probably be fine. And I remember that my mom did the thing where she, like, covers my eyes. Like, I remember that happening in the theater when it happened, because my parents didn't know there was going to be any nudity. But yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking the same thing watching the film too. I was like, why is this rated R? And then at the end of the movie, I'm like, oh, it's the boobs.
No, yeah, so actually I just Googled this. It says many audience members left the movie wondering how the film managed a lower rating. Specifically for that scene. I just Googled Titanic rated R or PG-13. And it was funny, my mom told me this, and she says that scene became so infamous that in places like the Bible Belt and in Utah, they would, when people wanted to buy the movie, the video stores would, they offered to, like, for additional fee, they would just cut that scene out of the film for you before you bought it. And that became a whole big thing. People are like, oh, you're censoring our art. But I'm like, seriously, you guys license it out to networks and they can cut it out. So you clearly are fine with it.
I think it's, quite frankly, speaking of that, I don't think I think Titanic could have been PG. Honestly, I think PG-13 is appropriate, but more for the disaster stuff. I remember that was the part that I wouldn't say it traumatized me, but the stuff that actually upset me when I saw that film in kindergarten was all of the cool stuff that happens in the latter half of the film. So I would still rate it PG-13, but not for the nudity.
Except for the nudity, I would have given it a PG rating.
Yeah.
Because even though the stuff's happening, there's nothing concrete except how somebody feels about it in the moment. About the stuff, like, because, like, none of, like, the stuff that they don't really, like, they don't show people getting all, like, beaten. Actually, they cut out a scene that probably would have justified a PG-13 rating more, but they don't show people getting all bloodied and being chopped up by the propellers or anything like that. Basically, it's understood that they drown. That's basically what it is.
Yeah, I think the context is what matters, and I think that's what makes the MPAA kind of a silly organization, is that they just base it on, like, the most just arbitrary, silly things, when it's like, I don't think nudity is necessarily something that's bad for young developing minds. I think the context in which it's seen and in the story, you know what I mean? Like, I think, I think the nudity in Titanic is very different from, like, the nudity in
Eyes Wide Shut,
Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't think that those things are the same.
I will say, I do think, because I don't, just because we brought it up, I am in favor of there being some sort of rating system, even if it gets overhauled, just because I do think it is important for people to be able to make informed choices about their media. And as I said,
Yeah, I agree. I think the rating, again, my thing, I think a rating system is good. I just, again, like maybe we'll talk about it in a future episode, but if you actually look into how the MPAA operates, it is the nuttiest thing ever, and it makes no sense.
Well, that's like, what's this? Oh god, I told you. I think I texted you about that. It's that wild guy who comes across as a total jerk. That's directing the NC-17 Marilyn Monroe movie. He's like, oh, I'm so shocked we got an NC-17 rating. When like interviews from 9 months ago was like, yeah, we're shooting for an NC-17 and we want to offend everybody. And I'm like, really? You're upset now that you got the rating you wanted. Okay.
Well, in bringing up the rating for this film, I actually, when we started, I was talking about how this film bombed really big time, because, again, it didn't even make $1 million. Right. Hopefully by now it's made more, but, I think that might have had something to do with it, because, anime wasn't, some foreign concept in 2007. Obviously, if it was, not a Miyazaki movie, it probably was going to have a limited release.
Yeah.
But an R rating is already going to kind of take that small number of people interested in the film and wean it down a little bit. So I do kind of think the rating might have been part of the reason why this did not succeed at the box office.
And I will say this, I do think it would have gotten a lower rating if not the first time, when that guy has her on the table and he's like, "Ooh, I love you."
Yeah.
And he's grabbing her in areas, that's probably, and then shortly after that, she becomes nude for the first time. I think that is what made it the R rating. If it had just been the scene at the end, I think it would have been PG-13.
And that's a good point, too. I forgot, it's funny, I was, thinking about it. That whole sequence was pretty disturbing. It's also we haven't talked about it on the show, but another film that I always thought was weird that it was rated R was The Matrix. And my theory is that it is a couple of scary sequences, like when Neo gets the spider thing in his stomach.
Yeah.
And I kind of think obviously it's the nudity is the reason this is rated R, but that scene in particular was just an offshoot of sexual assault, so I'm not entirely I think that's the big reason why. Also, it was creepy. The dude's talking about ooh, all the things I'd love to do with you, and blah, blah, blah.
I was like, okay, so
I was just a side character until I was written as a creep, and now I'm
I was worried that they were gonna make Shima like that, because he had that whole weird dream with this girl that was being creepy. I was so worried but I was so happy they just kind of kept him the quirky scientist guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I definitely enjoyed this movie.
I'm glad you did. And I had a feeling this was not going to be one of those surprises where you're like, I hated it, and I'm like, really, why? I had a feeling you were, especially when I was watching it myself, and the opening sequence with the whole circus thing, and just first off, I know you like circus themed stuff, but also just the let's get the show started, and there's just really cool opening right before the main titles where we see the detective's dream and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Even though there's a little, darkness to it, it's very exciting. It's very ooh, it's a great entry point into what kind of story you're about to see, because you see all the weird crap that's about to happen. And but yeah, I had a feeling you were gonna like this one.
I do want to watch this one again mostly for the reason because I want to see what I didn't get the first time around. Now that I've seen how it completes the circuit, I want to know all the stops it makes along the way.
Yes. And obviously I liked it. I had a feeling. I didn't know if I was going to like it going into it, but just based on what I had seen by Satoshi Kon, I had a feeling I was probably going to like it. And again, this is, as far as anime films go, this is one that you constantly hear people talking about, and that's why it's been on my list for over a decade. So I'm glad I finally checked it off.
And I'm not a super big anime fan, but I've heard of this movie before.
Yes. So I'm glad I finally checked it off my list after 10 years. And I got to share my first impressions of it with all of you lovely people. So what would you rate this film on our parody spoof of Ebert and Siskel's little 4-star rating?
I think it might be my smoked margarita, but how many do we do? Is it 4 or 5?
So it's 4. And for anyone who's listening, again, with us being kind of making fun of the elitist film crowd, we like to do a spoof on the Siskel and Ebert 4-star rating. So
I think I would give this 2.5 out of 4 pitchers of sweet tea with a dash of paprika in them. Mostly because, even though, like I said, I enjoyed it, I think it would have been better if if the main plot line had been just a little bit more clear.
So I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 4. Clear glasses of of sake, and it's funny. We're both. So the reason I think I'm rating it higher than you is I'm a sucker for visuals, and if anyone is really into like really amazing animation or just visuals in general in a film, this is your film. But we're both giving it. We're rating it lower for the same reason. I think this film's a little confusing. I think that it's still very entertaining, and I don't think you're going to be completely lost. But I would be very shocked if someone said that they fully understood this movie on a first go, unless they had read the book multiple times or just once.
Because maybe the book is just clear. You know, it's like one thing. Maybe it's one of those things that's hard to adapt.
Yeah, if you're going into this blind, I don't think you're going to be lost unless you're just not paying attention to what's happening. But I do think that there's going to be moments where you're like, what's going on?
What's happening here? And
I also do think, again, like I think part of it will also be if you're used to subs or dubs, because I don't mind them, but I will say that the surrealist elements of this film mixed with the fact that I was having to read to keep up kind of made, like, if there was a good dub available, I would check it out just for the sake of me being able to pay attention to what's on the screen rather than having to read at the same time.
Yeah, and like you said, because there's so much stuff happening visually, you want to be able to focus on the visuals and not have to worry about, because I kept having to do the quick look down to read then look back up because something drastic would happen. I actually backed up a few times because something drastic would happen when I was looking to read.
It always helps when it's kind of like a slow pace, or if like there's not a lot of talking or something. Like one film that we haven't talked about yet on the show that won Best Picture a few years ago, Parasite. Mm-hmm. That was pretty easy to follow because I saw it in theaters. Obviously, it had subtitles, and it was one of those where there wasn't a lot of talking, and also the visuals were really good, but they weren't like, it wasn't a crazy weird movie or anything.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I had to like keep, choosing what to pay attention to. This film is very fast paced and very crazy all of the time. So I will say, like, I don't mind having to read subs, but like splitting your attention between the two can be a little disorienting. So if there is a dub and you're not like a sub enthusiast like some anime fans, I would say try to find a dub for your first viewing if you don't want to be confused. But that's the reason I'm giving it 3 out of 4. Because just like you, I think it's a little confusing.
Right. So that's going to about do it for this episode then.
Heck yeah. So thank you guys for checking us out. If you have never heard of us before and enjoyed this episode, we have a whole backlog of episodes on a variety of different genres, so feel free to check those out. If you're listening to us on our YouTube channel, feel free to like, subscribe, leave a comment, all that stuff. We have got a Twitter. You can reach out to us. We are hopefully launching an Instagram sometime soon. And yeah, we're very happy to be sharing our thoughts with you guys, and we'll have a new episode out very soon.
Very soon. And as always, suck it, Scorsese.
We have been Whiskey and Sweet Tea, keeping it Kino. Talk to you guys next time.
Bye. Reels on the Rocks is a production of La Prince Laboratories. It is edited and produced by Alejandro Castillo and features original artwork by Asa Esparza and original music by Pat Mars. Follow us on Twitter at Reels on the Rocks, and tweet at us with any movies or topics you'd like us to discuss in the future.